thing which I find interesting and which I want to continue talking about is this defining oneself thing. Because when we think about it, people always can define themselves professionally or socially or by their family status or by the country of their birth, by the language they speak. But people usually don't like to do that. They usually don't like to say, you know, I am a logistics professional and that's all I can say about myself. So we were thinking, Shiva and I, that probably this website we are talking about should be more about what you are, what everybody is beyond all those concepts which usually define the person. But again, it's very difficult to name those things and to, you know, pronounce them. So we thought that probably we can try to hit those things by talking about something which a person really feels like talking about and feels like expressing oneself through. But again, I don't know what those things can be for you at this particular moment.
You want me to talk about how I see it, or do you want me to talk about how I see it philosophically?
Both.
So really you're asking me the question, how do I go about defining myself?
Yeah, I'm asking it again.
You asked me that yesterday, 2 days ago. But you want me to answer it this time in what point of view? That's different.
Basically, what you answered me before was that you don't want to give a definition of yourself because it's kind of
restrictive.
So now I want maybe to try another angle. How would you reply to it differently now?
When I act, I have a fundamental energy which is the motivation and the substance of the actions I take. Now, if I were to speak about this philosophically for a second, I would say there's being and there's doing. Being does not have to be defined because being is. What I am is a constant in the sense that no matter what anyone defines me as, no matter how I am affected by existence, I always am. I am exactly what I am at all times. So my being is the underlying force of anything that happens outside of that circle of passive being, passive existence, in the sense that this is my basis of all existence, this is what I am, and anything and everything which would manifest that others would perceive, or there would be an interaction with existence around me, would be coming from that platform of being. So, philosophically speaking, being is the source of all doing. Problems arise when we are not conscious of this and causing it to consciously manifest that way. We, and I mean me too, all of us, what we do is we allow the external world to manipulate or distort our doing, or let's put it this way, to so seriously impact it or influence it so that it could conceivably become something different than I would allow it to be if I were to choose from my being. And it is this phenomena which causes everybody who's interested in spirituality and religiosity or in self-actualization, self-realization, or any evolutionary process to be worried. And it causes them to want to transform because they see themselves become something they don't like. They see themselves become something that doesn't represent what they are. So we all know there is a being there, there is a feeling there, there is a me there, which is irrevocable, unchangeable, fundamental, and it's essential. It's our essence. So we battle with our integrity. The integrity wants to maintain being. Yet the external world doesn't care about our being. The external world influences us to transform, to impact us for its benefit. So our integrity is busy trying to prevent that from happening. The more you are aware of it, the more you can be called evolved or conscious or whatever word you want to use. The less you are aware of it, the more you are manipulated. And that's the philosophical understanding of if you don't define yourself, others will define you for you. Now, it's not a question of definition because you don't have to define the self. The self does not require a definition. The self is. The self, the being, simply requires to express what it is. It doesn't have to create anything because it already has everything there. So when I'm just manifesting my being, if another person were to perceive it in some other way than simply feeling it, I have to choose how that expression should be done. And that's the crux, that's the point of disciplines, that's the point of morality, that's the point of ethics, that's the point of action. Let's go back a second. That this concept of feeling another person's being, this is the core of all relationship. How you feel with another person. Is their being compatible with your being? That's the ultimate core. And basically we dance around that by judging how they talk. How do I feel about how they talk? How do I feel about how they look? How do I feel about how they act? This is really what we do inside. And so we are unconsciously, generally, feeling how we consider what the external world is doing. Yet, when we're unconscious about it, we think about it in terms of, I don't like the way they look. I don't like what you just said. That was not right. This is right. And so on. So, the problem everybody faces, I face, everybody faces, is how to maintain my integrity of being when I am going to act. And how I will express my being, that in a way which is representative of what it is. That's the whole crux right there. So it's not a question of definition, it's a question of integrity. Maintaining my integrity of being in terms of expressing. And how that is done might be another question, or might be it's the same question, I don't know.
Yeah, it may be another question, how that can be expressed.
It's a very, very important question. How can I express my being in action? And even more difficult, How do I express my being in action when I'm being impacted, when I'm being influenced, when I'm having to respond to things, stimuli which come to me from outside, which I have no control over, or even I have control over? How do I respond? How do I react? What is it that fuels my reaction? What is it that propels my reaction? What's the motivating force? What's the power of it? So these are the questions which really define how to act. And this is how you become defined to the external world. And that's what we call defining oneself. Not that we are actually defining ourselves. Ourself requires no definition. It is. But in reality, what it is how do we express our being in action? And that's where creativity comes in. Everybody's creative all the time. What you say, what you do, everything's an act of creation. All right, let's get practical, because that's very philosophical, but that's very important. That's the foundation of all things. When I'm sitting here, for example, and you are asking me something, I'm not going to answer you in a way which you want to hear. If you don't like what I'm saying, I'll stop saying it, because I'm not going to compromise my fundamental essence philosophically to please you. If you don't want to know this, don't ask me that question. Now, yet I may be in a party or a social situation, and nobody really wants me to express my being. They're not asking me that. They're asking me to be fun. They're asking me, let's take fun, for instance. Let's stop at fun. They're asking me to be fun. Okay. That means making jokes, or that means making humor. Now, I have a choice. I could make humor at the expense of someone else. I could hurt someone else somehow with my humor. A lot of comedians do that. Very famous comedians get a lot of laughs making fun of or making jokes about others. I won't do that. Why? Because I wouldn't do that as a person. I don't want to hurt others. That's my choice as a being. I end up hurting others anyway. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but my being says I don't like that. Hurting others is not an option. Making fun of others is not an option. So when I'm going to be funny, I'll make fun of situations or circumstances. Still, people get insulted sometimes. Nobody can do it perfectly. There's always somebody somewhere who you're going to push a button by being a little bit too honest, and you're going to get in trouble. But my integrity is struggling to maintain that balance, to try to fulfill the expectation of being funny, and at the same time, not hurting, not harming. So you see right there in that dichotomy, the struggle of the discipline of expressing, of being. This is, I think, a yoga practice. This is, I think, the most significant form of self-discipline that exists. To keep the integrity of the being intact, protect it, nourish it, and express it in compatible ways. And that's, if you want to call it a philosophy of life, you want to call it a religion, you want to call it a spiritual path, or you want to just call it being good, I couldn't care less. Because it has nothing to do with any of these designations. It is what I am, and it's me choosing to be that way in action. And the interesting thing is, whether I'm spiritual or not, or I'm in this group or not, or whatever, it doesn't make a difference, because every single person at every minute does the exact same thing. It's whether or not you're aware of it that makes the difference. And the more you are aware of it, the more concerned you are of the discipline of it. The less you are aware of it, the less you care about it. So we can talk about two totally extreme people, for an example. One is totally sensitive to this. The other is completely unconscious of this. So let's take an unconscious person. The unconscious person, nobody's this, nobody's either. These are archetypical extremes. They have nothing to do with reality. But it's good to understand that. The unconscious person, if he has an itch anywhere, he'll scratch it. If his nose is clogged, he'll stuff his finger up and pull it out. In normal society, we freak out. Children are like this. Children don't care what you think. They have a pain, they express it. They want something, they scream. They don't care whether you're sleeping or you have a headache. They just express. I'm not trying to say children are the worst. That's what they are. They have to learn and grow. But they're perfect examples of this. They're totally uninhibited. Whatever it is they wish to do, they do. They don't care. That's my toy. Bam! Give it to me. Mommy, she hit me on my head. But hey, that's my toy. So that's kind of an example. Like, there are people who act like children. We used to watch The Sopranos, and in The Sopranos, they were acting just like children. Hey, I don't like what you... That's enough of you. So they were acting like children. What they wanted, they took. They didn't care if it hurt their wives, didn't care if it killed another person, didn't care if it was against the law, couldn't care even if it harmed themselves. So there was this childlike, we call it childlike in the sense of not caring about others. We define that childlike quality as not caring about others, not being inhibited in relationship with the group, the society, not being integrated. Now, we also praise childlike qualities, a childlike heart, innocence. We praise innocence. We praise that uninhibited love. We praise that fearlessness. We praise that joy of life. We praise that energy. In that way, we feel it's good, but we dislike the insensitivity of the child. We dislike it. We dislike the uninhibitedness when it causes trouble to others. So you see that right there. And even in a child, you see that the two extremes, the conflict. Now, if a person is so sensitive that they can see how other people are worried about something or fearful of something, then they don't want to speak in a certain way. It's to cause them trouble, but they may not be honest. And then you have the problem of, actually, I'm not doing the archetypes. That's too crazy. I'm talking about practical reality. So we can forget about what I said about archetypes. But if the more sensitive you are, in that sense, you can become more afraid of causing people pain. You may not even speak. And therefore, you might not want to talk to anybody. You might be afraid of hurting them. But you might avoid saying something they need to hear. So there are all these balances all the time. Now, in the etheric platform, now I know this is a little esoteric, but in the platform of the etheric communication amongst beings who don't have the same physical limitations we have of bodies, which have certain social considerations, because people don't read your mind. You're not reading their mind. There's not telepathic communication. There's not that energetic communication normally. We hide behind the way we look. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? How are things going? Great. Really fabulous. Whereas actually, yeah, I can't stand one more day, but it's just great. So we hide behind it. We hide behind the facade of our existence. Now, in the etheric platform, there's no hiding. You immediately know everything of this person's psyche. It's just instantaneous. So there's no like hiding. And they know you. So what you are is what you are. So therefore, you only gather together with others who you don't mind that. There are some you don't want to be with. But here in this world, you have to be careful because nobody's open. Everything's hidden. So how you express is an issue. And how is that issue dealt with? We have social rules. We have social laws. Things that we follow. Some countries find other countries' social laws inappropriate. Yet, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. In Italy, for instance, if at the end of a big meal you let out a huge burp, everybody says, the cook says, yeah, I did my job. If you do that here in America, which is such a sterile place, I mean, everybody will just shake their heads in disbelief. They'll not be able to deal with it. The European culture, body odor was just another way of relating with a person. In America, you have to be so sterile that if the slightest body odor would manifest from you, everybody would be like, their eyes would just go up because you're not allowed to smell. You have to be sterile. And it's very strange like that. So there are many cultural differences. You can go through Africa, India, wherever, things which people do. In India, men hold hands. They're just being friends. When you hold hands in America, two men, everybody says they're gay. So everybody has cultural differences like that. You have to fit with them. You have to follow the laws according to age. Old people can't do like that. I was buying the car and I was in the shop and I had my hat on and I was inside and I didn't want this stupid thing. So I just turned it around, the way people do. The salesman looked at me and he said, "You're too old to wear your hat like that." And I was like, woo! Because there are laws, rules you have to follow. You have to be like that. People ask me, "How are you?" I say, I'm actually pretty horrible today. They don't respond. Because you're not allowed to say that. You're supposed to say, "I'm fine, and how are you?" So consider that there's the incredible dichotomy of me having to express what I am and the rules of society, the rules of the family, the expectations of what you should be. And life is in a battle between these two. And I don't just mean a little battle. I mean one big monster, huge battle. Every minute of every day, battling. And when you don't express your being or you don't get to express the problems of this, you express it in the dream states. You express it in your psychotherapy. You express it in your unconscious. You express it in insane acts which nobody can even imagine why you did it. Because you haven't been able to maintain that integrity of being and everything is out of balance and out of whack and distorted. So when people ask me how I am, if I'm actually feeling honest at that moment, I'll say how I feel. And if they say, "Wow, what's going on?" I said, "Don't worry about it. It's just always like that." Or if they don't respond, I'll let it pass. If I see that there's no use whatsoever to respond in any way but the way they want, I'll do it, but I won't be attached to it, which is difficult for me because I'm always expressing what it is in one way or another. So my first choice is expression of being. My second choice is neutrality to accomplish what I have to do. And my third choice is to not be involved with it at all. In other words, to just disentangle, extract myself from a situation where I cannot handle it. because I cannot be honest. I cannot be me in that situation. So I will only be in a situation where I can be me. Otherwise, it's just something I have to do to accomplish a task. I go in, I get out. Did that help?
Yeah, it helps. I have another.
By the way, that's exactly what I was writing about when I hurt my back.
Oh,
It was a whole thing about integrity. It's called Essence and Integrity.
Here's another thing. For example, well, what you are saying is that this being needs to be expressed. Otherwise, if you cannot express it through doing, it expresses in some other things, more or less. For example, if a person is not so developed or whatever, and doesn't really know what their being is, so it can be that actually their character, their actions and whatever they do or feel or think in this sense are also these outside things which they follow. So their being never gets expressed. Is this a tragedy or what?
Yeah, it's definitely a tragedy of major proportions. And in fact, that is the fundamental question which I have, I think, dedicated my life to resolve. I didn't even know I was trying to resolve this point until maybe some months ago. I had no idea really what I was moving towards. I knew I needed to create a new discipline, quote unquote. I knew that. I knew I needed to create a path, quote unquote. But it was not going to be a path or discipline which started from me and you had to get on it. Or it started from someone else and we were all following it. Not at all. It had to be that path of discipline which started with each of us and that each of us follow. And as I got that more and more in essence, it finally came down to this realization of exactly what you just said. The whole thing is to understand that the battle of life is to express myself in all my actions. Even when I say I'll have nothing to do with it, that's an expression of myself. Even when I say I'm neutral to accomplish a task, because the task is related to myself, that's an expression of myself. Even when I'm expressing myself, that's an expression of myself. So my entire life is an expression of myself. That's a discipline. And that is really cool. And that's actually what spirituality is all about. Because you can't express yourself unless you know yourself. So the question then becomes, how do you know yourself? And the answer is to just connect to your being through meditation. Now, I don't mean meditate on a this, meditate on a that, do a this, do a that. I mean pure relaxation. The ultimate aspect of all meditation is to relax away all stress, all anxiety, all influences, all expectations, any connections, any even kind of karmic connections for the sake of receiving reactions and being entangled. Let it all just relax. Don't have any stress of any kind. And just feel. Because by definition, when you've relaxed yourself from all these external things, the only thing left is being, by definition. So the discipline is that and that alone, as far as the core how to be, is to stop being anything else, is to let go of any endeavor or attempt and to just feel. And it's much easier than you could ever imagine. It is not difficult. And all of these disciplines, that even religions, everything is a fight, everything is a struggle with senses and sensuality and bodies and minds and spirit and matter and sex and eating and sleeping and all these things that just make us so crazy. It's a battle. And I say the battle will continue forever until you feel what you are. because once you have connection to what you are, your being, you won't fight anymore with these things because you'll know, does it express my being or not? Then you don't worry about sensuality and spirituality because you realize they're one. The being is sentient. It feels. So the question is, do I choose to express my being like that? That's the being to doing. That's the essence. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. This whole process, path, discipline, whatever you want to call it, that I've been struggling to create for me and share with anyone who wants to hear it, is attaining being and translating that being into doing. And I find that it's not difficult to maintain an integrity. That does not mean you won't feel pain. That doesn't mean you're going to be in bliss. It doesn't mean this or that or the other thing. It simply means every act is an expression of being directly, neutrally, or indirectly, somehow, there is being involved. And then when you see like that, the body becomes an extension of your being. Because your words are an extension of your being. What you choose to hear by choice is an extension of your being. What you choose to put in your mouth. It's not my business to say what you eat or don't eat, but sometimes people should be a little sensitive to what they're eating, how it affects their body, or how it affects their mind, or people who are just so drunk that they just roll on the ground. I understand trauma. I understand pain. I understand the desire to dull it. I don't judge it. There's a reason. I understand it. But that person should consider how it is for them. Because you can dull and dull and dull, but you wake up at one point. At one point you start feeling again. So the pain remains. Now the question is, how do you deal with it at that point? Do you drink more, or do you take more heroin, or what do you do? It's a never-ending cycle. It ends with death in one form or another. It doesn't help. So I want to be of service in this way. I can't say that it's always successful, and maybe sometimes people just have to die and try it again next lifetime. Maybe they had so many traumas in their previous life and in this life, they just cannot go on. And I understand that. Yet for most people, I think that there's no need for a rule or a regulation or a process that they should follow. They should feel what they are and then decide if that represents what they are, or if that's actually representing what some model is, or what some actor is, or what some fad says you should be, or what's expected of you, or what your parents said you should be, or what your teachers said you should be, or what your friends continue to say what you're be.
So if you're talking about it step by step, it's basically you first have to, not have to, but first you realize what your being is, you raise awareness of yourself.
I worry about the word realize, but go ahead.
Okay.
Aware.
Yeah. And then you raise...
Because when you say realize, and this is not just some ordinary thing, when you say realize, it implies in everybody's head, I have done a big endeavor to get to this point of realizing. Realize means I've realized.
It was a process.
It was a process.
Okay.
Whereas awareness is not a process. It's just simply focusing your attention there. And that's not work. That's just diverting your attention away from all these other things, which I'm not. And that's what relaxation does. Awareness is natural. Realization is a work. Even if it comes suddenly, with the bolt of lightning, pizzazz, wow! But that's a process leading up to that point. Awareness is not that, because it's just simply a letting go, and oh, there it is. So therefore I complained about the word realization.
So you become aware of yourself, and then you...
No. You can never become aware of yourself. That implies that the self and the perceiver of the self are different. You can never become aware of yourself. You may only be aware. Now, I know it sounds nitpicky, but when I understood this package that I expressed before, I understood how language has kept us prisoner in conceptions which are not either correct or work for us anymore, have any relevance to anybody anymore, and language is keeping us prisoner. Even this phrase, which everyone on earth would use, be aware of yourself. And in language, if I'm going to express this to you, I'd probably use it too. You should be aware of yourself. I know what I mean, but the language doesn't. The language made a difference between the awareness and the self, which is not so. Just be aware. Now, I may be aware of something, but I can never be aware of myself because myself is aware. So I may be aware of the heat. I may, like there's some heat coming here. I'm not aware of it because I'm talking. But if I allow myself to be aware, oh yeah, there it is. But I can't do that with myself because myself is the awareness. And I think that's the coolest. I love that. I love it because you think about how we're so imprisoned by language, so imprisoned by all these conceptions which we've just accepted because that's just what is, and it's not.
I'm afraid of talking now.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know.
But it's important, because
yeah, I can really destroy conversations this way.
The thing is that I start saying something and it seems to me, because I feel like I understood what you were saying, so I feel like I'm expressing the same. And then you stop me and it turns out that my words are totally different from what I understood or what I felt and from what you were expressing. And I don't see this difference in my mind. I can feel it, but you see, my brain doesn't grasp it until you start explaining what the difference really is. So this is very important.
Now, I know you understand.
Because a lot of people, they just listen to it and they would say, oh, this is the usual self-realization, whatever stuff. And then they see this part and they see that, oh no, wait, this is not the pattern. This is not the pathway which you have to go to get to this point where the realization, happens. This is not the struggle. It's different. Like the concept is different, but you cannot say it because you're using the same words. You can only feel it.
What you just said, the pathway, it's different than the pathway. That's a really important point because so far I have ever seen everything has a path to it. Everything has a tradition. Everything has a path. This was the way it was done. This is the way you do it. These are the tools you use to get this way. It's a path, step, 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 step. What I'm actually speaking about is not one of these winding linear paths. It's just an emanation of what is. In other words, instead of moving this way, you move that way. And how do you express that in words? It's very, very difficult because someone might argue, and I would understand this argument. Yeah, you say it's just like this, but you've got to get to that point. But actually, it's not a huge path to get to that point. It's one simple thing. Relax. And that's what makes it so cool. That you don't have to do anything to do that. Whereas to go on a path, you've got to do so millions of things. Books full of things you've got to do to go on a path. And to just simply emanate outwards from being, you don't have to do a thing except relax. And if you want to call that doing, fine, let's do some relaxation. But I was really happy you used that word path because it allowed me to speak about that. It's also subtle. All these things I'm talking about are so subtle. You just simply twist a word one little itsy bit and a whole new dimension of seeing it appears. And we've been so captured by words. The whole world is captured by words. And I think the reason for that is because it gives us an excuse to avoid dealing with what we are. Why? One very fundamental point, because we think deep down we are bad. We are bad, we're no good, we're sinful, we're fallen, we're whatever. Even these guys in The Sopranos, they know they're bad. And they're glad about it because it's a perfect expression of how they deeply feel inside. Like children, they express exactly how they feel. I'm bad. You're dead. What do I care? Because I'm bad and I'm expressing it as a child. So I think the reason why people are interested in religion in the first place is because they think they're bad. The reason why even the way parents teach children from their birth is, that's bad, don't do that, that's very bad. And we learn, oh, I bad, because I did bad. This is bad. Ultimately, I'm no good. Why? I'm a little fat. Oh, I don't look the way the stars look. Oh, nobody likes me. Oh, whatever. I become bad. I develop this whole idea I'm bad. Naturally, I'll embrace a philosophy that uses the same idea that we're bad. We're here in this world because we are bad, and when we become good, we go to God, to heaven. The bad becomes good. That's the process, to take the filthy, cruddy, dirty bad and make it a beautiful, clean, wonderful good. Somewhere else. You take from, because this is a place of bad. All the bad people are here because everybody you know is bad. And you're one of the bad guys in the bad world. So you got to leave the bad world by becoming a good guy. As soon as you become a good guy, you go to the good world. And this is the world. This is illusion and duality at its the peak of illusion and duality presented as the most important thing in the world, the religion, the spiritual tradition, the everything.
I think it's very important that you said that people feel they're bad, so they turn to religion. So the traditional kind of religion, we can say, is for giving you this process of a bad person becoming good. Whereas what you are talking about is not about becoming something. It's about being yourself, and you will not feel that you're bad because there is no...
Then you're at the traditional discussion. Is man inherently bad or is man inherently good? Hobbes and Locke, they talked about this junk to such a degree that books and philosophies, because this is the primary problem. If man is inherently bad, all of this stuff is good. If man is inherently good, you don't need any of this stuff because you are already. Then the question comes, why does good man become bad? And the other way around, why does bad man become good? So they say bad man becomes good because he's trained to be so. Good man becomes bad because he's trained to be so. Behaviorism. I am the product of what I have become molded into by surroundings, family, people, actions. Rewards came to me when I acted a certain way. I continued to do so. Punishments came to me. I modified my behavior. All of these principles still relate to the badness of man. Even if man is inherently good, You don't walk around and see somebody who everybody would say, oh, this person's good in all ways, and because that person himself would not say it. He sees his own defects. So the good became bad. Again, we're dealing with bad. How to again make that one who became bad back to the good. So either man is bad, either man is good. Either of these things are useless as far as what I'm speaking about. My concept is extremely simple. Is that we are neither bad nor good. We are. And that being is spiritual. In other words, it is something which is part of the divine energy of being. You call God or whatever you want to call, I don't care. It's that whole matrix of energy of being. And that is just what it is. Any way you would say it's good or bad would be your human definition being placed on whatever, the words or the actions or the concepts or the whatever. Because what is beyond good or bad. It is. It's the good or bad that we place upon it that everybody's so concerned about. So when you said the bad brings about religion, I say the bad concept brings about everything. It even brings about the bad weather. Did you ever notice that whenever there's war and everybody's totally absorbed in war, you get the coldest winters in history? Because everybody's mentality creates this frigid cold. So if we no longer worry about all this bad and we just are, the weather will change. Everything will change. This idea of this place being hell will be understood to be our creation of it as hell. Now, I'm sure you could extrapolate that into earthquakes or whatever you want, but I don't feel like saying that because that sounds wild. It's an unproven idea. It's a kind of like an idealistic concept, but I think it might be true. I know that's a lot to swallow. I mean, these are very, very cosmic points, and it's very, very subtle. I mean, even this point of they say man is good, he says man is bad, and they really think they're arguing about a different point, but they're not, because the good ones became bad, and the bad ones can become good. They're arguing about the same thing, that man becomes, whereas in reality, the truth is, man is. And all these other things are our creation. Even the idea, if I was to say man is inherently bad, that's my definition. Because all you can really say is man is. As soon as I say man is good or bad, that's me taking a position and imposing the definition on man. Because in reality, man is. And it's us who say that's good or that's bad. And why? Why in heaven's name would we do it? Yeah. And then you go through all these ideas. Why? Well, we learned it from our mother, or we learned it from our church, or we learned it somewhere.
You know what I find interesting to watch, to observe, is how people, when they have these ideas, they start making the entire world fit within their concepts. Like, I have friends who are Protestant Christians, and we were talking about cancer, and the girl told me, well, one thing I don't understand is why all those really spiritual people in our church get cancer sometimes. And then she started replying, like explaining it to herself, so it would fit within the familiar structure she lives within. And I find this self-limitation and self-restriction, and making, probably it's in humans' nature to make this world a familiar, explainable, easy to understand place to be.
You've answered your own question. It's our act of defining. This person's awareness, who you're speaking about, has been focused upon what the person thinks she is according to the group she's in. So that becomes her being. It's not her being, but that for her becomes her being. So therefore her doing is an expression of her being, because this is the way of existence. Doing follows being. Being never follows doing. Doing follows being. Why being never follows doing is another question. That should be answered later, because I know there's all kinds of points you could speak about it, but for simplicity's sake. So we have this mood, we have this mode that we always start with being and then define doing according to being. So what you think you are becomes the basis upon how you manifest that. So some people think they are Christians and their doing follows that. Some people think they are atheists, their doing follows that. Whatever. This is not a very illuminating point, but when you do like that, everything you see fits, because that's your conscious manipulation of your reality. That's your massaging of your reality to keep the integrity. That's not the point, and neither is that a problem. But to make people aware of what they're doing is my point. I don't care how you define yourself. The act of acting according to your definition shows that integrity is working. My point is to make you aware of what you really, the being really is, what you really are, not this thing, because nobody's a Christian. There's no Christian being. I know some people think so. There's no Jewish being. There's no Muslim being. There's no Hindu being. Because beings were beings long before any of these prophets who started these religions existed. It's not like the cavemen were less beings than us just because they didn't have a Christian faith. So, to understand that universal being, that's the point.
Do you want to answer that why being cannot follow the doing thing?
That doing follows being is an axiomatic principle. The problem being you don't know the being. You're not aware of the being. So you may accept a being that's not you and act from that point of view. This, even in this Vedic terminology, is called ahankara. It's the false conception of what you are. And all the action is going on from that point of view. It's a very basic philosophical point. But that doing cannot affect being is something I think nobody understands. It's stated, even in Vedas, it's stated in other places. But people don't really catch that point. Because no matter what happens around me, my being is always my being. Matter cannot transform spirit. We say we become covered. But covering can't change the being. No matter what is going on in the doing realm, my being is always my being. I may not feel very good with this combination of being, doing that I've accepted. That's another point completely. But the being itself is always the being. The proof of it is that I don't feel good about it. Because what is it that's not feeling good? So the doing can't transform the being, but the being has every possibility to transform the doing. This is axiomatic also, because the doing is not the living. The living force is the being. The being can create energetic activities. The being can create all kinds of events. The doing cannot, because the doing is just a manifestation. It's just something that happens. These are events. But the being is the one who initiates, the initiator. So therefore, by definition, doing cannot.